Crumbling stonework on forgotten shores holds the secrets of ancient sea routes. These mysterious harbor remains are far more than ruins. They are the keys to reconstructing a lost world of maritime highways that connected distant civilizations. By the end of this journey, you will understand how archaeologists transform silent stones and sunken timbers into a map of our ancestors' greatest voyages. We will uncover how a sunken Egyptian port revealed trade with Greece and why a Cambodian temple complex was secretly a massive inland harbor. What hidden story does your own coastline hold? The first boats were not grand vessels, but humble rafts of reeds and logs, pushed onto a river's current by a hand trembling with both fear and wonder. This was the true dawn of exploration, a time when humanity first dared to leave the sight of land, driven by a simple, powerful need to see what lay beyond the next bend in the coast. These initial voyages were monumental achievements, fundamentally reshaping how people lived and interacted. According to maritime archaeologist Dr. Lucy Blue, this shift onto the water marked a pivotal turn in human development, sparking the earliest exchanges of goods and ideas between communities who had previously lived in isolation. You can almost see it, a simple raft laden with obsidian or shells being carefully guided toward a familiar beach. But these beaches were the first harbors, nothing more than naturally sheltered coves where the water was calm. The real transformation began when someone decided to improve upon nature. They piled stones to create the first crude jetties, simple walls that reached into the water. This was a revolutionary act. These structures broke the force of the waves, creating a calm pool where boats could be loaded and unloaded safely, regardless of the weather. This simple innovation turned a random landing spot into a dedicated port, a place designed for connection. We have physical proof of this evolution. At a site known as H3 in Kuwait, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of a Neolithic coastal settlement. Here, they found evidence that this community was trading with the distant civilization of Mesopotamia. This was not just a village by the sea, it was a node in an emerging network, one of the first documented ports where goods and technologies began to flow across surprising distances. How did these early sailors in their fragile craft find their way? They learned to read the world itself. They navigated by the sun by day and the star patterns at night, using the celestial bodies as their map. These initial, tentative voyages laid every single stone for the vast intercontinental networks we will soon explore. The answers to how small trade became a global system lie in the gradual, brilliant sophistication of harbor engineering. A harbor was never just a place to park a boat. It was a living, breathing machine for commerce, a feat of engineering designed to tame the raw power of the sea. To understand these ancient complexes, we must learn to read their ghostly outlines. Picture a perfect, sheltered bay. The first and most crucial piece of the machine was the breakwater, a massive wall of stone or timber built out into the water to create a calm inner basin, a bathtub for ships. Inside this protected pool, you would find the key, a sturdy stone platform where vessels could tie up to unload their precious cargo directly onto carts or into warehouses. These warehouses were the economic heart, stockpiling everything from exotic spices and fine textiles to heavy metals and grain. And to guide it all, a lighthouse might stand sentinel, its fire a beacon cutting through the night, calling sailors home from the open ocean. This entire system, from the outer wall to the storage rooms, was a statement of ambition. The scale and sophistication of these components speak volumes. Look at the Roman harbor of Caesarea Maritima. Its builders used a special type of hydraulic concrete that could harden underwater, allowing them to construct massive breakwaters that defied the Mediterranean storms. This was a display of imperial power and engineering genius. Yet, on the other side of the world, in the vast Pacific, communities used what nature provided, adapting natural coves and building simpler wooden jetties. This contrast is the key. The grand, monumental harbor tells us of a centralized, wealthy state with vast resources to command. The simpler, adaptive port suggests a different kind of brilliance, one of deep environmental knowledge and communal effort. Historian Philip de Souza reminds us that these harbors were the critical nodes, the bustling airports of their day, connecting entire economies. A piece of Indian pepper could travel from a local farm to a Roman dinner table because of this network. So when archaeologists find a line of submerged stones, they are not just looking at rocks, they are looking at the skeleton of a global economy. They ask, how did this structure calm the water? How did goods move from ship to shore? The answers reconstruct a map not of land but of human connection. And this leads to an even deeper mystery. How do we find these vanished ports when they have been swallowed by the sea or buried under centuries of silt? The silent stones of a harbor tell one story, but the seafloor of Aboukir Bay reveals a far grander epic. For over 1,000 years, the legendary port of Thonis-Heracleion was thought to be just a myth, a story told by ancient historians. Then a team led by underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio began to find things. They uncovered colossal statues of pharaohs rising from the seabed, their faces still staring upward. They mapped the outlines of grand temples and found the wrecks of 64 ancient ships, all resting where they had settled in the soft mud. This was no myth. This was a real, bustling city that had simply vanished beneath the waves. Thonis-Heracleion was the mandatory gateway to Egypt, sitting at the very mouth of the Nile. Every foreign ship, especially those from Greece, had to stop here first. It was a customs and tax collection hub, a place where goods were inspected and duties were paid before anything could travel upriver to cities like Alexandria. The port was a colossal economic engine, and its sudden disappearance created a perfect time capsule. The very catastrophe that sank it, likely a series of earthquakes that liquefied the clay soil, also preserved it. The city did not burn or get torn down for new construction. It simply sank, locking its daily life in a deep, watery embrace. The discoveries are breathtakingly detailed. Archaeologists have recovered stone slabs called stelae, covered in inscriptions that lay out the port's official rules and taxes. They found specific weights and measures, the standardized tools that ensured a fair trade for everyone. These are the bureaucratic fingerprints of a major international emporium. When they find Greek coins next to statues of Egyptian gods or Athenian pottery in a sunken warehouse, they are seeing the evidence of a profound cultural fusion. This was not just a place where goods were traded. It was a place where ideas and beliefs met and mingled. The presence of shipwrecks from different cultural backgrounds allows experts to trace specific routes. They can follow the path of Egyptian grain and papyrus outward and track the flow of Greek silver and fine ceramics inward. The slow, geological sinking of Thonis-Heracleion gave archaeologists a unique gift, a frozen moment of ancient maritime activity. Reconstructing its precise layout, from its main canal to its grand temples, has directly rewritten our understanding of Nile Delta trade networks. It proves how one harbor could be the linchpin for an entire region's connection to the wider world. While Egypt's Thonis-Heracleion was a natural gateway, Rome demanded a port built by sheer human will. Across the Mediterranean, the empire faced a crisis. Its original port at Ostia was silting up, choking on the very sediment washed down by the Tiber River. Rome, a city of over 1 million people, was starving for grain. Emperor Claudius made an audacious decision. He would not just find a new harbor, he would command the sea to make one. The result was Portus, a colossal artificial harbor complex carved into the coastline. This was not a simple dock, it was a monumental machine for survival, designed to solve a logistical nightmare with breathtaking scale. The initial basin was enormous, protected by 2 curving breakwaters and a legendary lighthouse that rivaled the one in Alexandria. But the true genius emerged later under Emperor Trajan. He added an inner hexagonal basin, a perfect geometric shape dug into the earth, connected by canals to the Tiber and ultimately to Rome itself. This hexagonal port was a masterstroke. Its shape maximized berthing space for countless ships, while its calm, managed waters allowed for the efficient, feverish transfer of cargo. For decades, archaeologist Simon Key has led excavations at Portus, peeling back the layers to reveal this engine of empire. His team has uncovered the vast warehouses, called horia, that lined the basins. These were not simple sheds, they were multi-story, state-controlled storage facilities where grain from North Africa, olive oil from Spain, and wine from across the Mediterranean were stockpiled to feed the insatiable capital. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Every single year, hundreds of ships funneled through this controlled point, their cargoes measured, taxed, and redistributed. The very mud of the harbor has preserved stunning evidence. Shipwrecks found buried there are time capsules of specific trade routes. One vessel might be filled to the brim with Spanish amphorae, the distinct clay jars that carried olive oil, while another holds the ghostly imprint of North African grain. These are not just sunken boats, they are frozen moments of commerce, directly mapping the economic arteries that pulsed across the Roman world. What does this deliberate, monumental construction tell us? Portus is the ultimate example of state power shaping sea routes. This was not trade that grew organically from 1,000 individual voyages. It was a system engineered from the top down, a centralized command over the sea lanes to guarantee the steady supply that kept an empire stable. The Romans did not just use the sea, they bent it to their will, building a harbor that was as much a symbol of control as it was a feat of engineering. This centralized model, however, was not the only way to rule the waves. Far from the heart of Rome, a completely different kind of maritime power was rising, one built not on imperial decree, but on spiritual devotion and colossal ambition. Far from the imperial might of Rome, a different kind of maritime genius was flourishing along the banks of the Sabarmati River. Here, in what is now Gujarat, India, the ancient city of Lothal built a harbor that was not about power but about precision. Around 2,400 years before the Common Era, its engineers designed a brick-lined basin so advanced it could rival modern docks. This was not a simple wharf. It was a carefully calculated structure, complete with a lock-gate system to manage the water level within. As the tide rose, the gate could be opened to let ships enter. When the tide fell, the gate was closed, trapping enough water to keep the vessels safely afloat and berthed. This was a direct, brilliant response to the challenge of tidal flows and the relentless problem of silt. Archaeologist S.R. Rao, who led the excavations, saw this as undeniable proof of the Harappan's deep understanding of their environment. They were not just building near the water, they were engineering a dialogue with it. Lothal was more than a port, it was a specialized economic engine. Just steps from the dockyard, archaeologists uncovered a massive warehouse and a bead-making factory, where skilled artisans produced delicate carnelian beads that were prized across the ancient world. This was a city built around the business of trade, a production line feeding a global network. But how do we know its ships sailed such vast distances? The evidence is etched in stone. A Persian Gulf seal was discovered at Lothal, a small artifact that speaks of a specific connection to the civilizations of Mesopotamia. At the same time, in Mesopotamian cities like archaeologists have found Harappan weights, beads, and ivory. These objects are the echoes of a forgotten route. They map a journey across the Arabian Sea, a direct sea lane that bypassed the treacherous, mountainous land routes of the Iranian plateau. This was one of the world's first great inter-civilizational trade networks, a system that moved Indian cotton, exotic woods, and gleaming ivory to the west in exchange for metals and other goods. The Harappans' mastery of river and sea navigation at Lothal did not just connect 2 points on a map. It wove together the economic and cultural fabric of 2 great civilizations, proving that long before empires, the sea was a highway for shared prosperity. This early Asian network invites us to look even further east, to a kingdom that would turn its entire coastline into a spiritual gateway to the heavens. Yet the most profound harbors were not always found by the sea. Deep in the Cambodian jungle, the stone temples of Angkor have always whispered of a lost empire's grandeur, but their true secret lay hidden beneath a blanket of earth and tree roots. For centuries, we saw only the magnificent stone, the intricate carvings of gods and kings. We failed to see the water. Recent advances in aerial laser scanning, a technology called LiDAR, have finally peeled back the forest canopy to reveal the truth. Angkor was not just a city of temples, it was a vast, engineered waterscape, a hydraulic metropolis built around a colossal inland harbor system. At its heart were immense reservoirs known as barrays, artificial lakes so vast they could be seen from space, and a complex web of canals that stretched for dozens of miles. This was not a coastal port, but it served the exact same function. These canals were liquid highways, bustling with boat traffic that moved goods and people from the capital to the Tonle Sap Lake, a massive freshwater body connected to the Mekong River, which itself flowed into the South China Sea. The research of Damien Evans and his team has fundamentally rewritten Angkor's story. Their LiDAR maps show a city designed around water flow, with canals radiating out from the center like spokes on a wheel. This network allowed the Khmer Empire to project its power deep into the interior, collecting forest products like rare hardwoods and aromatic resins, along with precious stones and locally made ceramics. These resources did not just stay in the capital. They were loaded onto boats and transported along this managed water system, reaching international merchants waiting on the coast. This redefines what a harbor can be. It was not a single place where ships docked, but an entire riverine system that functioned as a continuous, flowing port. How do we know Angkor's goods traveled the world? The evidence lies at the bottom of the sea. In the waters of Southeast Asia, shipwrecks like the Belitung wreck, a 9th century Arabian dhow, have been discovered carrying a cargo that included distinct Khmer-style ceramics. This single sunken ship is a snapshot of a global trade route, directly linking the inland capital of the Khmers to the vast maritime Silk Road. Their goods were bought and sold from China to the Middle East. This means an empire's wealth could be built not by controlling a coastline, but by mastering the rivers that reached into the heart of a continent. The Khmer did not need a navy to command the sea lanes. They built a harbor that reached all the way to their temple doors. This concept of a far-reaching, river-based trade network finds a startling parallel in another part of the world, where seafaring warriors used rivers not for peaceful commerce, but as swift arrows pointing toward the wealth of empires. The wind whips across the narrow neck of the Jutland Peninsula, a place where the salt spray of the North Sea almost meets the colder, stiller waters of the Baltic. Here, at the crossroads of worlds, stood Hedeby, Encircled by a defensive semi-wall of timber pilings, its harbour was not a grand stone monument, but a bustling, muddy, and brilliantly pragmatic centre of exchange. This was the Viking world in microcosm, a place where the image of the fearsome raider dissolves into the more complex figure of the master trader. Goods moved through this choke point like blood through a vein. Furs from the northern forests, gleaming amber from Baltic shores, finely forged Frankish swords, and sadly, individuals captured in conflict, all changed hands in a vibrant, often harsh market economy. The strategic genius of Hedeby's location cannot be overstated. By controlling this narrow land bridge, the Norse could effectively control and tax all sea traffic moving between the two seas, a maritime toll booth of immense profitability. Excavations have laid bare this multicultural hub. The remains of longhouses, workshops for craftsmen working antler and metal, and the ghostly outlines of ships preserved in the harbour mud paint a picture of a permanent, thriving community. The discovery of the Hedeby longship itself, a sleek and sturdy vessel pulled from the silt, gives us the exact blueprint of the technology that made this network possible. But the most telling clues are smaller, and they traveled much farther. The unearthing of Arabic silver coins, dirhams, their inscriptions gleaming, and fragments of silk that once graced the courts of Byzantium, are silent witnesses to connections that spanned continents. These artifacts did not arrive by chance. They are the proof of long, interlocking trade routes, where Norse merchants traded northern goods for silver in the east, weaving Hedeby into an economic web that stretched all the way to Baghdad and Constantinople. This changes everything. It reveals the Vikings not as isolated raiders, but as sophisticated network builders, whose power was as rooted in commerce as it was in conquest. Their model was different from the imperial Roman system, built on seasonal fairs, flexible alliances, and a deep understanding of the sea's pathways. The success of this northern exchange, however, hinged entirely on one thing: the ship. Without a vessel capable of crossing open oceans and navigating shallow rivers, Hedeby would have been just another village. The true engine of this entire story, from the Nile to the North Sea, was the revolutionary design of the sailing ship itself. Scattered stones and silted basins hold their secrets tightly. Transforming these silent remains into a vibrant map of ancient trade requires a scientific detective story, one that pieces together clues from geology, biology, and advanced physics. The modern harbour archaeologist's toolkit is a symphony of disciplines, each instrument revealing a different part of the melody. It begins not with diving, but with seeing through the earth. Geophysical surveys use ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistivity to create images of what lies buried, mapping the ghostly foundations of walls and quays without ever breaking ground. Out in the water, side-scan sonar paints a detailed picture of the seabed, while magnetometers detect the faint magnetic signatures of buried metal objects, like ancient anchors or ship fittings. These non-invasive methods allow researchers to map an entire submerged landscape before a single artifact is recovered. But to understand the timeline, you must go deeper, literally. This is where coring comes in, a process that extracts long, vertical tubes of sediment from a harbour basin. Each layer of mud and silt is a page in a history book. Scientists like Dr. Christopher Mohange analyze these cores, studying the microscopic shells of organisms and ancient pollen grains trapped for centuries. The types of tiny creatures found can tell you if the water was deep or shallow, salty or fresh, revealing the very environment the ancient sailors experienced. Pollen from distant lands might hint at the exotic cargoes once stored in nearby warehouses. This biological evidence adds a living dimension to the cold stone. Another powerful tool is dendrochronology, the science of tree ring dating. A waterlogged timber from a jetty or shipwreck contains a precise record of its life. By matching the pattern of wide and narrow rings to a master chronology, researchers can often determine the exact year the tree was cut down, giving a stunningly accurate date for the harbor's construction or repair. All of this data, from the magnetic to the biological, then feeds into another crucial process, creating a stratigraphic profile. By carefully excavating a slice through the harbor layers, archaeologists can read the sequence of construction, renovation, and abandonment like a stack of pancakes, each one representing a different era. The final transformative step happens in the digital realm. Using sophisticated 3D modeling software, specialists can input all this information, from core samples to wall outlines, to virtually reconstruct the port. They can simulate how water flowed around the breakwaters where ships would have berthed, and how goods moved from the quayside. Data becomes a visual narrative, a walkable ancient world. The ongoing work at the harbor of Byblos in Lebanon perfectly exemplifies this layered approach. There, sediment cores have revealed a staggering timeline, with port development layers stacked one upon the other from the Bronze Age through to the Roman period. Each layer contains its own story of technological change and shifting trade patterns. How does combining so many scientific fields change the game? It moves the reconstruction from an educated guess into the realm of an evidence-based narrative. A single stone might suggest a wall, but when sediment analysis confirms the water depth, dendrochronology dates the timber pilings, and sonar maps the full extent of the basin, the story becomes undeniable. This rigorous, multi-pronged investigation is what allows us to confidently trace the ghostly outlines of ancient sea lanes, not as lines on a map, but as living corridors of human connection. A stone worn smooth by 1,000 ropes tells a story of relentless activity. Every block in a harbor ruin, every carefully laid slipway, is a physical record of choices made by engineers and merchants long ago. The size of a single mooring stone is a direct clue to the size of the ships it served. A massive, deeply set stone could handle the heavy hawsers of a grain freighter, a vessel carrying many tons of cargo, while a smaller, simpler post might have been for local fishing boats. This simple distinction helps archaeologists estimate the scale of trade, revealing whether a port was a local landing or a hub for ocean-going giants. The design of a breakwater is another open book on local conditions and human ingenuity. A thick, sloping wall of rubble suggests builders who are battling powerful, storm-driven waves, sacrificing elegance for pure strength. A more refined, vertically faced structure using cut stone might indicate a commer bay or a community with the resources, an advanced skill to prioritize durability and appearance. Even the method of quay construction speaks volumes. A quay built with precise ashlar masonry, where every stone is cut into a perfect rectangle, signals wealth, centralized organization, and perhaps the influence of a major imperial power like Rome. In contrast, a quay made of rough rubble fill points to a different reality, one of practical, local solutions using available materials and communal labor. These are the fingerprints of different cultural traditions and economic realities etched in stone, but the most direct human connections are often found in the scrolls left behind. Inscriptions and graffiti carved into harbor walls are the voices of the past speaking directly to us. A sailor might carve the name of his ship and a prayer to Poseidon or Neptune for a safe return. A merchant's mark found near a warehouse could signify a delivered cargo of wine or olive oil. These are not official records, they are personal moments of hope, faith, and business, offering a glimpse into the daily lives of the people who made these ports pulse with energy. The Roman lighthouse at Dover, the Faroes, was far more than a navigational aid. Its very presence, a towering structure of Roman design on the coast of Britannia, was a powerful symbol of imperial control and the promised safety of their maritime highways. It told every arriving ship that they were now entering the ordered world of Rome. So when we look at these remains, we must ask what the wear patterns reveal. A key edge polished to a shine by the friction of countless ropes points to centuries of vibrant, continuous use. A slipway that shows little erosion might hint at a harbor that failed, its promising trade routes shifting or fading away. Learning to read these material clues transforms a pile of stones into the daily reality of ancient seafaring, a world that relied on the synergy of human courage and meticulously built infrastructure. A harbor was a planned destination, but a shipwreck is a journey interrupted. These sunken vessels are the lost travelers of the ancient sea lanes, their final resting places marking the very paths they sailed. Each wreck is a moment frozen in time, a sealed capsule preserving not just a ship, but an entire economic mission. Inside the hull, archaeologists find the cargo exactly as it was stowed, the crew's personal possessions scattered nearby, and the very bones of the ship itself, built with techniques unique to a particular culture and home port. This is where abstract trade routes become stunningly personal. The most common time capsules are amphorae, those distinctive ceramic jars that carried the lifeblood of ancient trade, wine, olive oil, and pungent fish sauce. Each region produced its own style with unique shapes, fabrics, and stamps. By analyzing these details, specialists can trace a single amphora back to the specific workshop that made it, perhaps on a Greek island or in a North African coastal town. Finding a cluster of these identifiable jars on a wreck allows researchers to map the distribution of goods with pinpoint accuracy, revealing not just a general direction of trade, but the specific economic relationships between producer and consumer. Pioneering work of George Bass at the Cape Gelidonia wreck off the Turkish coast demonstrated this power. There, a ship from the late Bronze Age was found carrying a cargo of copper ingots. By analyzing the unique chemical signature of the metal, researchers could definitively trace it back to the mines of Cyprus. This was not just a suggestion of trade, it was a confirmation, physically linking the raw material from its source to a vessel caught en route to its final destination. An even more vivid picture emerges from the famous Uluburun shipwreck. Its cargo was a floating marketplace, a collection of goods from at least 7 different cultures, including Mycenaean Greek pottery, Canaanite jewelry, Egyptian gold, and Mesopotamian tin. This single vessel was not following a simple point-to-point route. It was engaged in a tramping trade, a long, multi-stop voyage where goods were picked up, traded, and exchanged in a complex circuit across the eastern Mediterranean. So how does a catastrophic loss offer a clearer picture than a planned harbor? The structures of a port show the system's design, but a shipwreck captures the system in motion. It is a direct data point on the map, a single, tangible voyage that charts the real, often meandering, path sailors actually took between the grand nodal harbors. These wrecks are the individual brushstrokes that, when combined, paint the complete picture of our ancestors' maritime world. The open ocean was a trackless desert of water, yet ancient sailors crossed it with nothing but the sky as their map. They were masters of celestial navigation, a sophisticated art that turned the heavens into a guiding clock. In the northern hemisphere, the North Star, or Polaris, was a fixed point of reference, its constant position above the North Pole allowing a navigator to gauge their latitude, the distance north or south of the equator. By day, they used the sun's arc, and by night, they memorized the rising and setting points of specific constellations, steering their vessels along these celestial highways. But the sky was only one part of the equation. The sea itself provided the engine for their journeys through predictable seasonal winds, like the monsoon systems of the Indian Ocean, and the vast river-like currents that could carry a ship for thousands of miles. This profound environmental knowledge transformed an empty horizon into a familiar road. For the final, crucial approach to a hidden harbor, they relied on pilotage, the intimate art of coastal navigation. A skilled pilot would read the landscape like a book. A distinctive double-peaked mountain on the horizon signaled a specific bay. They would take soundings, dropping a weighted line to measure depth and bring up a sample of the seabed, distinguishing soft mud from gritty sand to confirm their position. They even observed the behavior of seabirds, knowing that certain species flew out to sea to fish at dawn and returned to land at dusk, offering a living compass toward an unseen shore. The color of the water could change from deep blue to a telling green, indicating shallow reefs or a river plume that guided them to a safe entrance. We have a remarkable written record of this practice in the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a 1st-century Greek guidebook to the Indian Ocean. It reads like a modern sailing directory, describing landmarks and listing the number of days sail between ports like Aden and the Indian coast. This document was not for explorers but for established merchants, proving that these routes were well-traveled and their secrets carefully recorded. This intellectual achievement finds its ultimate expression in the Polynesian voyagers. They settled islands scattered across millions of square miles of the Pacific, a feat once considered impossible. Their system was a masterpiece of non-instrumental navigation. They used star paths, memorizing the sequence of stars that passed over specific islands. They learned to read subtle ocean swells, feeling the way a vessel was refracted by islands beyond the horizon. They watched for specific cloud formations that gathered over distant land and followed the migratory flights of birds known to nest on shore. This was not guesswork, it was a science of observation passed down through generations in song, story, and direct apprenticeship. The success of every voyage and the survival of entire communities depended on the flawless transmission of this deep, intimate knowledge. What does this tell us? It reveals that the greatest navigation tool was the human mind, trained to see patterns in nature that are invisible to us today. These sailors did not conquer the sea, they conversed with it, and in doing so, they wove the world together with nothing but courage and profound observation. These silent harbors only existed because of the cargo that filled their holds. The entire system was driven by a powerful economic engine, a global appetite for specific goods that made the risk of a sea voyage worthwhile. Across the Mediterranean, the foundational commodities were grain, wine, and olive oil, a trio that moved in staggering volumes to feed and supply the Roman world. This was bulk trade on an industrial scale, the ancient equivalent of container ships carrying the essentials of daily life. But in the Indian Ocean, the incentives were different. There, the winds of commerce were filled with the scent of pepper and cinnamon, and the gleam of precious stones and frankincense. These were high-value luxuries, where a single ship's hold could hold a fortune, justifying a journey of thousands of miles. We often picture the Silk Road as a caravan of camels crossing deserts, but in reality, it was as much a maritime highway. Chinese silk, delicate porcelain, and fragrant tea were loaded onto ships in ports like Guangzhou, traveling by sea through Southeast Asia and across the Indian Ocean, eventually reaching the markets of Rome. The very fabric of Roman society was literally woven with threads that had traveled by sea from the other side of the world. How do we trace the flow of something as perishable as wine or as common as pottery? The answer lies in the humble clay jar, the amphora. These ceramic containers were the shipping crates of antiquity, and their shapes are like regional fingerprints. An expert can look at an amphora's form and fabric and identify the vineyard or olive grove it came from, sometimes even the specific estate. Epigraphists, scholars who study ancient inscriptions, analyze the stamps pressed into the wet clay before firing. These stamps can name the merchant, the producer, or the year of production, creating a detailed business record that survives for millennia. When archaeologists find a shipwreck filled with a single type of stamped amphora, they are looking at a direct manifest for a specific commercial voyage. This evidence allows us to watch the economic rise and fall of entire regions. For instance, the widespread discovery of a type of tableware called African red slip ware, produced in Roman Tunisia, maps a distinct trade network. As these distinctive red bowls and plates appear in villas from Britain to the Black Sea, they chart the economic influence of North African producers, complementing the massive flow of grain and oil from the same region. But these ships carried more than just goods. They were floating arcs of culture. A merchant vessel laden with pepper from India might also carry Buddhist monks heading to new lands. A ship full of Egyptian papyrus could have a copy of a Greek philosophical text in a sailor's chest. The desire for silk introduced not just the fabric to Rome, but also new ideas about the distant, sophisticated civilization that produced it. Religions, artistic styles, and technological innovations all hitchhiked on these trade routes. The cargo manifest of an ancient shipwreck is therefore much more than a list of objects. It is a ledger of early globalization, a tangible record of how taste, belief, and knowledge flowed across the water, connecting humanity in a web of exchange that was both economically profound and culturally transformative. The true wealth of a harbor was not only measured in gold or grain, but in the sheer diversity of human voices echoing across its docks. These ports were the world's first melting pots, where a sailor's prayer in Greek could mingle with a merchant's bargain in Tamil, and the scent of foreign incense drifted from a dozen different altars. In a single afternoon, you might witness a Roman trader making an offering to Neptune for a safe return voyage, while just steps away, a Buddhist monk from the Gangetic Plains chanted quietly, having arrived on the same ship that carried pepper and pearls. This was the daily reality of these global intersections. The very architecture of these places reflects this blending. At the Egyptian port of Berenice on the Red Sea, archaeologists have uncovered not just temples to Egyptian and Greek gods, but also a structure identified as a satrap's shrine used by traders from India. These were not segregated communities, but integrated spaces where different beliefs existed side by side, suggesting a practical tolerance born of mutual economic interest. The spread of Buddhism itself is a story written on the water. Missionaries and monks did not travel on specialized vessels. They booked passage on the broad-beamed merchant ships that plied the routes between India and Southeast Asia. A single voyage could carry cinnamon, cotton, and enlightenment, with the teachings of the Buddha disembarking in Sumatra and eventually reaching the courts of China. This cultural diffusion left a permanent mark on language. The very word for rice in Greek, oriza, is a loanword that traveled from ancient Indian languages, likely through the bustling ports of the subcontinent. Similarly, terms for navigation and specific spices moved effortlessly between Arabic, Malay, and Chinese, creating a shared vocabulary of commerce and connection. Perhaps the most stunning artistic evidence of this fusion comes from the Gandhara region. There, sculptors created statues of the Buddha, but they rendered him with the realistic, muscular physique and draped robes of a Greek god, a direct result of the cultural currents flowing along the sea and land routes from the Mediterranean. What does this mosaic of faiths and languages found in Harbour Mud tell us? It reveals that these were places of remarkable openness. The economic necessity of trade fostered an environment where difference was not just tolerated, but became a source of new artistic forms and spiritual ideas. A harbor was a gateway for the human spirit, proving that the most enduring cargo was often intangible. The perfect harbor was a gift from the land itself. Ancient builders were masters of adaptation, seeking out nature's ready-made shelters. A deep, curving bay provided a natural breakwater, a river mouth offered a protected estuary and a route inland, and a sturdy offshore island created a calmly shore where ships could find refuge from the punishing wind. The very shape of a harbor was a conversation between human need and the unyielding reality of the coast. But the environment dictated more than just location. It set the clock for all maritime activity. In the Indian Ocean, the rhythm of trade was governed by the mighty monsoon winds. For 6 months of the year, the wind blew steadily from the southwest, perfect for sailing from Africa toward India. Then it reversed, blowing from the northeast for the other half of the year, carrying ships back the way they came. This was not a suggestion, it was a command. Entire economies were built around these predictable cycles, with merchants planning their voyages years in advance, knowing they had to arrive, sell their goods, and depart within a strict seasonal window. The bustling activity of a port like Muziris in India would swell to a fever pitch as the wind shifted, then fall into a period of quiet maintenance as the fleet was away. The land itself was never still, and its slow, powerful movements have rewritten the map of ancient seafaring. The relentless flow of rivers carries silt downstream, gradually filling in the very basins that made a harbor useful. This process of siltation is a constant battle, one that many famous ports ultimately lost. The great city of Ephesus, once a brilliant Aegean seaport, now lies several kilometers from the water. The Cayster River slowly choked its magnificent harbor with sediment, severing the city's lifeline to the sea and sealing its fate. For archaeologists, this burial is a double-edged sword. While it obscures the ruins, it also preserves them, sealing layers of history under protective mud. In a dramatic contrast, the harbor of Phalasana on Crete tells a different geological story. Here, it was not silt but the immense force of tectonic uplift that transformed the landscape. The entire harbor complex was thrust upward, lifting its stone quays and fortified walls several meters out of the water. Today, you can walk on the dry, ancient docks, seeing the carved mooring rings that once secured ships, now high above the waves. This bizarre preservation offers a perfectly frozen snapshot of a working port. So how does this knowledge guide the search for lost harbors? Understanding these forces allows researchers to read the modern landscape for clues. They look for a coastal plain that might hide a silted-in bay, or a sunken valley that could have been a protected anchorage. They study historical records of seismic activity to identify areas of uplift or subsidence. The rise and fall of a port was not always a story of economic failure. Often, it was a simple, inevitable surrender to the power of the planet. The stones of every ancient harbor tell this story of ambition meeting geography, a partnership as complex and enduring as the sea itself. A towering column of fire piercing the night sky was more than a navigational aid, it was a promise. The pharaohs of Alexandria, commissioned by the Ptolemaic dynasty in the 3rd century before the Common Era, was a statement in stone and flame. Its immense height, estimated to be over 100 meters, and its sophisticated system of polished metal mirrors to reflect a massive fire, made it one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But its true legacy was not its singularity, it was its influence. The pharaohs became the archetype, a model replicated across the Mediterranean world. From the bustling imperial port of Ostia to the North African hub of Leptis Magna and the distant Roman outpost at Dover, these lighthouses formed a network of light, a state-sponsored safety system for commerce. Their construction required immense resources and skilled engineering, an investment only a powerful, centralized authority could make. This was infrastructure as an instrument of policy, a deliberate effort to make the sea lanes predictable, safe, and profitable for the empire. For a sailor weary from a long voyage, the distant glow on the horizon was a profound psychological comfort, a signal that the perils of the open sea were nearly over and the order of the civilized world was at hand. This blend of practical function and symbolic power was often woven with spiritual significance. Many Roman lighthouses incorporated small shrines to Neptune, the god of the sea. A sailor would offer a prayer for safe passage upon seeing the light, and perhaps another upon landing, seamlessly connecting divine favor with the state-provided beacon. These structures were not left to chance. They were staffed by state-appointed keepers, civil servants whose vital job was to maintain the flame that guided the tax-producing merchant fleets. The enduring power of this ancient engineering is not just a historical footnote, it is a physical presence we can still witness today. The Tower of Hercules in Corunna, Spain, a Roman lighthouse built in the 1st century, still stands and functions. Its continued use for nearly 2,000 years is a stunning testament to the Roman mastery of durable, purposeful design. So what does this network of fire tell us? The widespread construction of lighthouses reveals a fundamental truth, that political power and economic prosperity were inextricably linked to the safe passage of ships. It was not enough to conquer territory. A true maritime empire had to domesticate the sea itself, transforming a chaotic wilderness into a managed highway. The lighthouse was the ultimate symbol of this control, a guiding hand reaching across the waves to shepherd wealth and security into port. The relentless rhythm of the Indian Ocean was set not by kings or empires, but by the wind itself. For half the year, a powerful southwest monsoon filled the sails of ships departing Arabia and Africa, pushing them steadily toward the spice-rich coasts of India. Then, as if on a celestial command, the winds reversed. From November onward, the northeast monsoon began to blow, offering a guaranteed passage home. This was not merely a weather pattern. It was a natural engine that powered an entire economic system, creating a precise, predictable calendar for maritime life. Ports from Aden to Musaris lived by this cycle, their docks swelling with frantic activity as the wind shifted, then falling into a hushed period of maintenance and waiting once the fleet was gone. This predictability was revolutionary. It meant a ship could plan a long-distance voyage across open water with stunning confidence, eliminating the need for exhausting journeys tacking against the wind. It enabled the establishment of direct, scheduled trade links between the Roman Empire and the Indian subcontinent, a connection vividly documented in a 1st century merchant's guide known as the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. This document reads like a captain's log, detailing the number of sailing days between ports and the best seasons to depart. On the Egyptian coast of the Red Sea, the port of Berenice thrived as a critical terminal in this system. Ships laden with Indian pepper, gems, and silks would arrive from the monsoon highway, only to have their cargoes transferred to the backs of camels for the overland journey to the Nile. From there, these exotic goods would flow to Alexandria and onward to the dining tables and markets of Rome. The physical proof of this direct connection is overwhelming. At the site of Arakkaimdu in southern India, archaeologists have unearthed massive quantities of Roman pottery, from fine aretine ware to the shattered remains of countless wine amphorae, alongside hoards of Roman coins. These are not random finds, they are the discarded remnants of a permanent Roman trading post, a community of merchants who lived and worked in India, waiting for the wind to change so they could send their acquired wealth back west. This reliance on a natural clock created a unique form of international trade, one that was intensely seasonal yet incredibly efficient. It fostered a deep interdependence across the Indian Ocean world, where the prosperity of a Roman merchant was tied directly to the predictable breath of the monsoon, an invisible force that connected continents with its ancient, reliable pulse. The vibrant, almost bloody hue of Tyrian purple began with a humble sea snail. In the crowded ports of Tyre and Sidon, the air must have carried a distinct scent, a mix of salt water and the pungent odor of countless murex shellfish being processed. For the Phoenicians, this was the smell of empire. They perfected a complex, labor-intensive method to extract a minute amount of dye from each creature, a secret they guarded so fiercely it became their sovereign wealth. The dye did not fade, instead growing richer and brighter with sunlight and wear, making it a permanent symbol of power and divinity. To produce just a single gram of this precious substance required the crushing of thousands of shells, leaving behind vast, sloping hills of discarded remains that still mark these ancient industrial harbors today. This was not casual production, it was a systematic, industrial-scale operation that fueled a maritime superpower. How could a single color compel such an expansive network? The answer lies in its staggering value. In the Roman era, purple-dyed wool could cost more than its weight in silver, effectively making it a form of currency. This economic incentive drove Phoenician ships to venture farther than any civilization before them. They were not just explorers, they were resource hunters, establishing colonies and trading posts from Cyprus to North Africa and even to the Atlantic coast of Spain. These outposts served a dual purpose, securing new sources of murex and other raw materials like silver and tin, while also acting as distribution centers for the finished, dyed textiles and other luxury goods flowing out of the Phoenician homeland. Each new harbor was a strategic node in this vast commercial web. They favored locations on small offshore islands or rugged promontories, sites that were easily defensible from land-based threats and offered quick access to the sea lanes. This careful placement reveals a civilization whose identity and security were intrinsically tied to the water, their ships becoming the ubiquitous cargo vessels of the ancient world. The archaeological record confirms this purple-stained reach. From a Phoenician shipwreck off the coast of Malta to royal tombs in Greece and Etruscan villas in Italy, fragments of dyed fabric and the distinctive heaps of murex shells appear, tracing the routes of this specialized trade. The Phoenicians did not need to conquer vast territories. They built their influence through commerce, connecting disparate cultures by satisfying a universal desire for a color that shouted status. Their legacy demonstrates how the relentless pursuit of a single, exquisite commodity could chart new coasts and weave a maritime network that stained the map with the color of royalty. The ambition of the Ming dynasty was measured in timber. In the early 15th century, the Longjiang shipyard near Nanjing was a spectacle of organized chaos, a sprawling industrial complex where the largest wooden ships the world would ever see took form. Under the command of the court eunuch Admiral Zheng He, this treasure fleet was an armada of diplomacy and trade, its very existence a declaration of Chinese power and sophistication. These were not mere trading vessels, they were floating cities, some reportedly over 400 feet long, carrying not just soldiers and sailors, but scholars, diplomats, and translators. Their mission was to project the celestial majesty of the Ming Emperor across the known world, from the bustling ports of Southeast Asia to the distant, fabled cities of the Swahili coast. At each stop, the fleet's arrival was a monumental event. They exchanged magnificent Chinese silks and porcelains for exotic tributes, including African giraffes, which were received in Beijing as living symbols of heavenly favor, along with aromatic spices and rare tropical hardwoods. This was trade as theater, a carefully orchestrated display of soft power that wove a web of allegiance and commerce across the entire Indian Ocean. The strategic port of Malacca in modern-day Malaysia became the linchpin of this network. It was here that goods from across the region were consolidated, and where the massive fleet would wait for the shift of the monsoon winds to carry them home. The prosperity of Malacca and dozens of other harbors was, for a few brief decades, directly tied to the rhythm of these Chinese expeditions. Then it all stopped. A shift in the political winds in the imperial court, a new faction favoring isolation and fiscal conservatism, led to a stunning decision. The great voyages were cancelled, the records of the fleet and its routes were systematically destroyed, and the mighty treasure ships were left to rot in their berths. The map of global connection was abruptly redrawn by a single political decree in a faraway capital. The vibrant maritime network that had stretched from Nanjing to Zanzibar simply vanished, leaving the ports it had sustained to find new patrons or fade into obscurity. The story of the treasure fleet is one of history's most profound what-if scenarios. It demonstrates with stunning clarity how the most advanced maritime technology and the most ambitious trade routes are ultimately vulnerable to the changing priorities of land-based power. This deliberately forgotten network leaves us to wonder how different the world might look if those ships had continued to sail. A world away from the monumental harbors of Rome, a different kind of maritime center rose from the shores of East Africa. The Swahili coast was a string of independent city-states, each a brilliant gem of coral stone set against the blue of the Indian Ocean. In ports like Kilwa, Mombasa, and Sofala, the architecture itself spoke of a unique fusion. Grand palaces and austere mosques were not built from imported marble, but from the living reef itself. Local artisans quarried coral blocks at low tide, carving them into intricate geometric patterns and soaring domes that reflected a deep absorption of Islamic design. This was not a borrowed culture, but a new creation, an indigenous African civilization that had confidently integrated the wider world into its own identity. The wealth that built these stone towns flowed from a sophisticated intermediary trade. Swahili merchants acted as the critical link between the vast African interior and the merchants from Arabia, India, and beyond. They traded gold and ivory from kingdoms like Great Zimbabwe for fine Chinese celadon porcelain, vibrant Indian cotton textiles, and delicate glassware from the Persian Gulf. The Great Mosque of Kilwa, with its legendary domed roof, was not funded by foreign patrons. It was a local project paid for by the profits of this vibrant exchange. To walk the ruins of these cities is to walk on a carpet of broken pottery. The ground is littered with millions of ceramic sherds, a tangible record of global connection. The pale green glaze of Chinese celadon and the distinctive blue and white patterns of Ming porcelain are found here in staggering quantities, proving that these African ports were not peripheral stops, but essential destinations on a trade route that stretched all the way to the South China Sea. This evidence directly challenges older, outdated narratives of an isolated Africa. The Swahili coast was not a passive recipient of foreign goods, but an active, prosperous architect of its own destiny. It presents a powerful model of globalization that predates the modern era by centuries. A world where a merchant from Kilwa could just as easily discuss the quality of silk with a trader from Guangzhou as he could bargain for ivory with an envoy from the interior. These stone towns stand as a permanent reminder that the ocean has always connected more than it has divided. The sea could give, and the sea could take away. Around 1200 years before the Common Era, the thriving harbour cities of the eastern Mediterranean learned this lesson in the most brutal way imaginable. A wave of destruction swept across the coast, leaving burned palaces and shattered quays in its wake. The agents of this chaos are known to history only as the Sea Peoples, a mysterious confederation of maritime raiders whose sudden attacks brought the sophisticated Late Bronze Age world to its knees. The archaeological record at places like the great port of Ugarit in Syria is stark, a layer of ash and rubble that speaks of a vibrant trading hub violently and abruptly silenced. These were not random raids, they were precise strikes against the very nodes of the international system. The harbours of the Hittites in Anatolia and the Mycenaeans in Greece suffered a similar fate. Their intricate trade networks with Egypt, Cyprus, and the Aegean severed in a historical instant. The safe sea lanes that had carried copper, tin, and luxury goods for centuries became treacherous, empty of all but the most desperate voyages. This collapse ushered in a period often called a Dark Age, where long-distance trade shrank and cultural connections faded, a stark demonstration of how fragile these globalized networks truly were. For all the mystery surrounding their origins, the impact of the Sea Peoples is chillingly clear in the stratigraphy of ruined cities. They understood that to break a civilization, you must first break its ports. We have one powerful contemporary glimpse of these seaborne invaders, carved into the stone walls of Pharaoh Ramesses III's mortuary temple at Medinet Habu. These reliefs celebrate his great naval victory over the Sea Peoples, depicting a chaotic battle on the waves. The scenes show the distinctively high, proud ships of the invaders, their prows often carved with bird heads, locked in combat with Egyptian vessels. The inscriptions speak of confederated groups with names like the Peliset and the Shekelesh, peoples who had moved from the sea, disrupting the established order. This was not merely a military conflict, it was a clash between a settled, state-controlled system and a mobile, maritime force that operated outside of it. The lesson written in the ash of Ugarit and the victory reliefs at Medinet Habu is a profound one. It reveals that the same sea that carried spices and silk could also carry existential threats. The prosperity of an interconnected world hinged on a delicate balance, one that could be undone by a shock to its vital coastal arteries. This ancient crisis holds up a mirror to our own globally connected age, asking us what systemic shocks we are vulnerable to and what happens when the highways of commerce suddenly become avenues for conflict. Their canoes were not mere vessels but floating islands of life, carrying families, plants, and animals across an ocean of stars. The Polynesian expansion stands as humanity's most audacious maritime migration, a journey across thousands of miles of open water in double-hulled canoes known as waka. In this vast blue wilderness, the very idea of a harbour transformed. There were no stone quays or monumental lighthouses waiting for them. Their destination was not a specific port, but an entire island group, a whisper of green on the horizon. A sheltered lagoon or a simple, protected beach was all the harbour they required, a natural gift from the land they had worked so hard to find. The only infrastructure they built upon arrival were the sacred mari, temple platforms that connected them to their gods, and the practical canoe sheds that sheltered the vessels that were their lifeline. This reveals a profound philosophy of the sea, where the network was not etched in stone but carried in memory and kinship. How did they possibly navigate such emptiness? Their charts were not drawn on parchment, but woven into oral traditions and navigational chants passed meticulously from master to apprentice. These living libraries contained generations of environmental knowledge, teaching wayfinders to read the subtle patterns of ocean swells, the specific flight paths of homing birds, and the distinct cloud formations that gather over unseen islands. The archaeological evidence of this epic voyage is traced in a trail of pottery. The distinctive designs of lapita pottery, with their intricate geometric patterns, appear like breadcrumbs across the Pacific, marking the journey from near Oceania out to the most remote corners of the Polynesian Triangle. This trail leads us to Hawaii, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and the isolated shores of Rapa Nui, Easter Island. Each new landfall was not the end of a route, but the beginning of a new community, a new node in a web of shared ancestry and knowledge. So what does this mean for our understanding of a maritime network? The Polynesian achievement forces us to look beyond breakwaters and warehouses. Theirs was a fluid, living network woven from wayfinding skills and kinship ties, a map written in the stars and sung in chants. It was a system built on courage and profound observation, proving that the greatest harbor of all is the human mind, capable of finding home in the trackless sea. A harbor's mud holds more stories than its grandest monument. While we see the stone quays and broken columns, the true heartbeat of these ancient ports is sealed within the layers of silt at the bottom of their basins. Scientists now plunge long, hollow tubes deep into this sediment, extracting core samples that act as time capsules, preserving a hidden archive of daily life. Within this dark, wet mud, they find the seeds of foreign fruits, the fragile wing cases of long-dead insects, and the microscopic eggs of intestinal parasites. This field, known as bioarchaeology, reads this organic debris like a book, revealing what stone alone never could. By analyzing ancient DNA and stable isotopes locked in these sediments, researchers can determine the precise types of food that were stored in harbor warehouses and eaten in the crowded taverns nearby. The bones of livestock can be traced through their chemical signatures, revealing whether the cattle grazing near the docks were raised locally or brought over vast distances on ships. But perhaps the most intimate clues come from parasites, the eggs of intestinal worms, which can survive for millennia in the right conditions, are found in the mud of Roman harbors. Their presence tells a stark story about sanitation, diet, and the health challenges faced by the sailors and merchants who crowded these bustling, often unsanitary, hubs. This is not just data, it is a window into the physical reality of the people who animated these stone landscapes. A stunning example comes not from a coastal port, but from an inland ritual pool in Jerusalem. Sediment cores taken from the Pool of Siloam contained a remarkable find, microscopic traces of black pepper that originated in India. This single spice particle, invisible to the naked eye, proves that global trade networks reached deep into the heart of ancient Judea, flavoring even the most sacred of spaces with products from another world. So what can a seed or a parasite egg reveal that a grand statue cannot? They fill in the vibrant, living details. They tell us about the meals shared by a crew far from home, the illnesses they endured, and the invisible, everyday connections that wove the ancient world together. This microscopic evidence completes the picture, transforming a silent ruin into a living, breathing community. A silent stone on a screen can be rebuilt into a bustling waterfront with a few digital keystrokes. This is the power of modern archaeology, where three-dimensional modeling and virtual reality are not just illustrating the past, they are resurrecting it. By feeding architectural principles, laser scan data, and historical accounts into sophisticated software, teams of digital artists and researchers can reconstruct the port of Carthage in all its Punic glory or the crowded docks of Piraeus in ancient Athens. We are no longer just looking at a faded foundation. We are seeing the vibrant color of the painted facades, hearing the imagined cries of merchants, and understanding the sheer, overwhelming scale of these engineering marvels. These digital harbors are far more than pretty pictures. They are dynamic analytical tools. An archaeologist can now run complex simulations to test a theory, watching how a virtual storm's waves interact with a digital breakwater, or calculating precisely how many ships could have been efficiently maneuvered within a reconstructed basin. Projects like the Digital Portus initiative invite everyone to explore the hexagonal basin of Rome's greatest port from their own home, peeling back layers of history with a click. This technology also serves as a profound act of preservation. As coastal erosion and urban development continue to threaten these fragile sites, a perfect digital twin is created, a permanent record that will endure for future generations long after the original stones may have succumbed to the sea. How does this visual and immersive experience transform our connection to history? It collapses the centuries, turning abstract trade networks into a tangible, walkable world. We are no longer distant observers, we are virtual visitors standing on the quay, feeling the immense human effort it took to weave the world together. These digital tools are our new compasses, guiding us through lost landscapes and making the whispers of the ancient mariners finally audible. The stone they walked and the water they sailed still shape our world in ways we can barely perceive. The ghostly outlines of ancient sea lanes are not lost. They are merely buried beneath the asphalt of modern mega-ports and the steel of container ships. Look at Singapore, a titan of global trade. Its strategic position on the Strait of Malacca echoing the exact same logic that made the Srivijaya Maritime Empire a powerhouse 1,000 years ago. The ports of Rotterdam and Shanghai similarly thrive on geographic gifts first recognized by forgotten fishermen and ambitious merchants. The deep, sheltered water and the access to inland river systems that attracted a Roman grain ship are the very same features that now welcome the largest cargo vessels on Earth. This is not a coincidence, it is the legacy of geography, a continuous conversation between human ambition and the unyielding coast. The cultural fingerprints of these exchanges are even more profound. A single meal can tell the story of an ancient voyage. The chili pepper, so central to Thai and Indian cuisine, is a gift from the Americas, arriving on the same maritime routes that once carried silk and spices. The very words we use for common goods often hide a seafaring past, their origins scattered across different languages and harbors. Religious landscapes were permanently altered by these watery highways. The spread of Buddhism from India to East Asia or Islam along the Swahili coast was not an abstract diffusion of ideas. It was a physical journey with missionaries and merchants traveling together on the same ships, their beliefs disembarking at bustling ports to take root in new soil. This deep history is not just academic, it is crucial for navigating our modern world. The intense geopolitical focus on strategic straits like Hormuz and Malacca is a direct continuation of ancient struggles to control the same narrow sea lanes. Modern debates over maritime law and the protection of underwater cultural heritage force us to ask who owns the past that lies on the seabed, the scattered wrecks and harbors that are the common inheritance of humanity. Every new discovery, whether a shipwreck in the Mediterranean or a silted dock in Cambodia, adds another piece to this vast puzzle, reminding us that history is not a closed book but a living narrative being rewritten with each pass of the archaeologist's trowel. How does this recognition help us now, understanding that our globalized world was woven together over millennia through countless individual voyages, fosters a deeper sense of shared heritage? It reveals that our cultural identities are rich tapestries made from threads that traveled the world by sea. The ancient mariners, in their relentless search for new harbors, did more than trade goods. They laid the foundation for the complex, interconnected planet we all call home. From the sunken wharves of Thonis-Heracleion to the digital models of Portus, our journey shows a world far more connected than we knew. These ports were not isolated in points but vibrant, beating hearts in a global network, their rhythms set by the demands of commerce, the power of the environment, and the constant flow of new ideas. We have walked through the colossal, state-built machine of Rome's Portus and marveled at the quiet, hydrological genius of Angkor's inland harbour. We have seen the Vikings' pragmatic hub at Hedeby and traced the scented trails of incense and pepper across the Indian Ocean. Each stone, from a massive breakwater to a simple mooring ring, tells a chapter in this epic story of human ambition. It is a story of ingenuity, of learning to read the stars and tame the waves, all driven by an insatiable need to connect. This entire exploration rests on a simple but profound truth. The past is not a foreign country, distant and unreachable. It is the very foundation upon which our present world is built. The routes mapped by those ancient mariners still guide our container ships today. The cultural exchanges that happened on those crowded docks have flavored our languages, our beliefs, and the very food on our plates. So the next time you look at a map or stand on a coastline, I urge you to see it with new eyes. Consider the hidden histories that lie beneath the waves and the sands. What forgotten port might have once thrived near your own home? The story of our world is, in many ways, a story written in water. If this voyage into the depths of maritime history captivated you, please subscribe for more journeys into our shared past. And I would love to hear from you. Which ancient harbor or lost sea route fascinates you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below.